All right, so I'm going to discuss the role of the prison in the organizing ecosystem of the Jewish Labor Bund. For anyone who doesn't know, the Bund was an organization founded in 1897 in Vilna for the purpose of organizing a mass movement of Eastern European Jewish workers to advance the interrelated causes of democratic socialism and diasporic secular Yiddishkeit. I focus here specifically on the Bund in the Russian Empire from its founding until the 1917 revolution, though of course there's much to be said about different manifestations of incarceration in the following years. I'm going to do a bit of framing, and then we'll look at some Bundist songs from arrest and imprisonment. The specter of the prison loomed large in the consciousness and material realities of the Jewish labor Bund in the Russian Empire. What you're looking at now is a few portraits of Bundists who served time incarcerated. As an illegal organization and under the Tsarist regime, the Bund operated with a keen awareness that the radical organizing work they were doing brought with it the threat of imprisonment, policing, and state repression. Encounters with police and imprisonment were crucial in cultivating revolutionary political consciousness among the Bundist ranks. If the Tsar may have been a faraway abstraction for workers in the Pale of Settlement, the police and the prison were concrete and concentrated manifestations of the regime's oppressive power. Thousands of Bundists, Central Committee members, and rank-and-file workers alike experienced arrest and spent time incarcerated, whether in local jails, in large urban fortresses like the Citadel in Warsaw, or Siberian exile. Exile is a bit different perhaps than incarceration or imprisonment in the sense that it was often open air, but I still think of it as carceral because it's restricted movement, often involved forced labor. Yet, most historical accounts of the Bund that I'm aware of gloss over the prison, give it a sort of implicit framing as a sort of blank space. It's the sidelines of the movement while the real action occurs on the outside. This is quite understandable, as it's true that prison prevents people from being out in the streets and engaged in most forms of political struggle. And it's true that documentary evidence from inside the prison is scarce and subject to harsh censorship by design. But I want to intervene in the narrative that prison is an ungenerative space by bringing in the framework of critical prison studies, a genealogy of thought that comes largely out of the Black radical tradition. We learn from critical prison studies that states operationalize prisons to disappear human beings, to render people who deviate from state-constructed norms as bad and criminal, and to sever communal relationships that it finds threatening. Because the work of the prison is to isolate and disappear those within its grasp, when we ignore the role and the contributions of imprisoned people in our historical analyses, we're reinforcing the divisions prison creates and acquiescing to this project of invisibilization. And we learn from critical prison studies that because incarceration forecloses many conventional avenues for political engagement, considering the prison in our analysis of movements compels us to think more capaciously about what kinds of actions, intimacies, and thinking constitute radical praxis. So in this talk, I'm interested in exploring what changes about our understanding of the Bund when we resituate the prison from the periphery to the center of our analysis and consider it an important terrain of movement building. Incarcerated Bundists radicalized their arrested peers, wrote, made art, schemed about the future of the movement. And Bundists outside of prisons organized prison breaks, raised funds to support or bail out their imprisoned comrades, smuggled literature through the walls, and showed up in masses to greet their arrested peers as they were moved through town. In these kinds of actions, we can see how members of the Bund develop practices of placemaking that refuse state-imposed logics of invisibility and disposability, and how they understood police and prisons as key sites of oppression. In my paper, I will focus on a collection of songs found in the songbook Arbeit und Freiheit, Work and Freedom. Published in 1921 by folklorist and committed Bundist Shmuel Lehman, the book is a collection of songs that arise from the people in the time of the freedom movement in Tsarist Russia. The book contains an entire section of Lieder von Arrest und Tvisa, songs from arrest and imprisonment, which contains 11 distinct songs and several variants of each, mostly from Bundists, though a few from members of other revolutionary organizations. In many contexts, music has been an especially good way to subvert carceral containment, because sound is not spatially bound and therefore does not obey the confines of the prison walls, hence why noise demonstrations at prisons and jails are a major historic and contemporary protest tactic. As musicologist Shauna Redmond notes, music, quote, while detectable and traceable, cannot be contained or wholly stopped. In the next portion of my presentation, I'll dive into 3 songs from the Lehman collection to look at what they can tell us about how members of the Bund engage with the prison. The first song I'm going to discuss is called Hör nur ois, just listen, or perhaps just hear me out. It was shared with Lehman by someone named Hanna Greenkreut in Warsaw. The title is an imperative directed at the singer's comrades on the outside. Just listen, you good brothers, what has happened to me? Oi, what has happened? From the most beautiful splendor, the greatest glory, they have arrested me. So I'll have the text of the song in Yiddish and my likely very imperfect translations on the slides, and I'll just pull out a few things to highlight. So I see this song as grappling with the duality of simultaneous rupture from and deep connection to the Bundist community on the outside. The framing of the song as a plea for the singer's brothers in the movement to listen indicates a real sense of isolation in the singer, a fear that their community will lose loyalty to them, even as they assert their promise to remain loyal in the face of carceral repression. I will serve in every little prison, and I will remain loyal to my brothers. The song speaks again to the idea of rupture and separation, saying, I have received a new name. They call me prisoner, addressing the prison's attempt to sever the prisoner internally from their self and their personal identity. And then the chains, they are my guards. They accompany me to Siberia, which is so evocative of a deep isolation, spatially far away with only metal chains to keep them company. Yeah, at the same time, in the way that the singer addresses their outside community across very far geographic distance, they make a radical assertion of connection. I'm not sure, but the way the song is presented in the songbook with multiple variants and adaptations suggests that the song perhaps had somewhat of a reach and may very well have successfully made it out to their comrades beyond the prison. But whether or not it did at the time or only did so later, I think the claim that it makes to connection amidst rupture in the lyrics and the act of singing the song reflects that the singer is holding a conception of connectivity and relationality that refuses the terms of the prison's imposed isolation. If the singer of Hör nur ois is asking their comrades on the outside to listen to them, to care about them, then we have somewhat of an answer to that plea in another song in the songbook, Die Tritt von Tyrannen, The Steps of Tyrants. This song is sung by Bundists outside of prison about their arrested comrades. It's documented in the Lehman Songbook and recorded orally in Ruth Rubin's collection by Max Makowski, who recounts hearing the song at a meeting of workers in the forest sung by a Bundist woman who came from Bialystok. This song is longer, so I just have excerpt verses on the slide. And it begins with the Bundists learning that a comrade of theirs has been arrested. They lament, ah, how bitter is this land where the best go to shame. Our loyal brothers and sisters, actually sisters and brothers, switch the order. Who knows if we will have the consolation of seeing them again. The singer of Hör nur ois, the previous song, is assuring their comrades that they will remain loyal, and we see here that Bundists are affirming that they see this loyalty in their arrested siblings. Die Tritt von Tyrannen moves from a state of despair and hopelessness, resigned to the possibility of permanent separation, into a bold call to action. Then we will arise from our plank beds, and we will liberate Russia. We will destroy the prisons and jails and make everyone free. Those who are exiled in Siberia, languishing without end, we will bring a new life into being. I'm interested in how the perspective of the song shifts as it goes along. Initially, the singers are talking in the third person about a comrade and his experience in prison. But then, towards the end of the song, we move into a first person plural. We must end our suffering. We will arise from our plank beds. So we're seeing a collapsing of the divisions between the people singing on the outside and their comrades on the inside, asserting that their suffering is deeply linked and therefore that they have a shared responsibility to rise up and fight against it as though they were all prisoners, which also alludes to an analysis of the way that the characteristics of the prison, restricted mobility, harsh surveillance, lack of civic opportunities, etc., did not just impact those in prison, but everyone, especially the Jewish proletariat under the Tsar. And the way that these lyrics are ordered suggests that destroying the prisons would be a necessary step in liberating all of the Russian Empire. Once the suffering from prison ends, the broader liberation movement can take hold. The third song I'm going to discuss is Es Dremelt in Turme, The Prison Dozes. This song is an adaptation of a very popular folk song with lyrics written by Joseph Heftman called Wenn es dremelt in do Städtel, The Town Dozes. And in later years, the song was adapted into a Holocaust song, Es Dremelt in Ghetto, The Ghetto Dozes. While, though I'm not going to go beyond the Tsarist period today, perhaps gives us some insight into the continuities and parallels people drew across different carceral iterations. Es Dremelt in Turme is recorded in the Lehman Songbook and the Ruth Rubin field recordings sung by Ruth Rubin herself. So I'll read the whole thing because this one is shorter. The prison sleeps, the shutters are closed, a soldier is doing his rounds. He is guarding the walls, the chains, the night. He guards the people in prison within. We sit and suffer from hunger and cold, all for freedom for all the world. We are tormented and racked with pain. We struggle for freedom in life and death. And neither hunger nor prison nor cold will cause us to fear. We must free the people of the world. We must fight the Tsar's might. We must drive away the darkness of the night. To the question of perspective, this song is interesting because the we that it's sung in is a little bit ambiguous. Depending on who's singing it, it might be referring to a collective of incarcerated people, or it could be that same we that we see in the previous song, where those singing the song, though they may not be in prison, group themselves together with the prisoners in shared plight and struggle. I want to bring in the work of carceral studies scholar Sarah Haley, who in her book No Mercy Here argues that the blues music created by incarcerated Black women in the late 19th, early 20th century South was a form of sonic sabotage against the carceral system. And though the conditions Haley writes about are in some ways quite different than the ones I discuss here, and I'm careful to make a direct comparison, I think that the framework of sabotage that Haley offers is quite important in understanding what these songs are doing. And I think that Es Dremel in Turme is maybe the strongest example of this sonic sabotage. The singers have a clear eye that the prison tries to suppress their work by scaring them, using hunger, cold, darkness to beat them into submission. So although singing these songs cannot literally crumble the prison walls, they operate as a form of epistemic sabotage, disrupting the state's ability to quell their revolutionary power through incarceration, as they insist that these tactics will not deter them. So I'll conclude with a few closing thoughts. As I've tried to highlight throughout the presentation, a major theme across these songs is the insistence from Bundists on the interconnectedness between the movement on the outside of prison and their comrades within. And I think that this could have potentially interesting implications for how we think about the Bundist principle of Doigkeit, here-ness, which would be developed and named in a coherent way later in the Bund's organizational life, but manifested in different ways even in this time. What does here-ness look like in the context of arrest and exile, where people were forcibly taken away from the loci of their communities? I think we can see that in this time, Bundists mapped a conception of here that was not so territorially bound to what was physically proximate, but that was inclusive of their constructed ideas of where their community solidarities and allegiances were situated across space. Can looking at the prison and Bundist relations to it help us think about the ways that they conceptualize diaspora more broadly? And does Doigkeit help us to be more attuned to the prison itself as a place where relationships are made, lives are built, the political struggle is continued? To wrap up, I'll just close by saying that I intend for this presentation to be an invitation into further and deeper study of the role of the prison in Bundist organizing and in other contexts of Ashkenazi civilization. These songs are one preliminary way into that, and I'm really excited to continue this work and see what else we can continue to think about. So thank you all so much, and excited for the other papers.